This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this.
A very, very, very good evening. Sorry, turned my camera on and off. It wasn't doing what it was supposed to. It is Tuesday, the 21st of June, 2022. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Raja Mia. I am responsible for the Recusant 9 transmissions. And I spent the last 24 hours or so, well, some of it enjoying the sunshine, if I'm honest with you. I went to visit my mother. She fed me. Oh my, Signor Pe, where have you been? Signor Pe and Oldham. What's that Shakespearean Quote, when shall we three meet again? Oh. Oh, indeed. Okay. Some serious stuff. I've been making my way through the report, 203 pages. I have a methodology that I use. It's full of inconsistencies, and Malcolm NEWSAM and Gary Ridgway's careers are over. It's as straightforward as that. Everywhere they go, they're being introduced as renowned experts, blah, 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 blah. Bullshit. Pair of con artists, cover-up merchants. Recruited to damage limitation. Recruited for damage limitation purposes. Yes, it is that, isn't it? Okay. Sorry, my chair's wiggling and joys of having a... I need to get a new chair. All right, first things first. I see Oldham is doing what Oldham does best, and I'm sorry, mate, I can't be arsed. I don't mean it as a, you know, these people are an irrelevance. Will be Joshy, whoever else, they're all a bunch of... You can see it, can't you? You know what you shared with me earlier, mate? Is going on about how expensive the review was. As though, and not what that it actually clearly is that unconscious bias that working class white girls aren't worth the expense, not worth the cost. Oh, more should have been found out, and we've not got what we wanted. Doesn't even live in our town, doesn't care about our town, and just wants to use our town as a stepping stone as he gets closer and closer with the Labour Party establishment that runs Manchester and Greater Manchester. So I ain't got any time for him anymore. I've got any time for Neil Wilby, although it did make me giggle. One of you phoned me earlier or messaged me earlier, and apparently his press pass, that is waves to get entry everywhere, wasn't allowed into the press conference. And he wasn't allowed in. Burnham had blocked him. That's telling, by the way. There is some seriousness there. That's telling the shadow minister in Keir Starmer's government, Jim McMahon, who's neck deep in this scandal, regularly engage and endorses Neil Wilby. Yet Neil Wilby was prevented by Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, from attending the press conference. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? And indeed, sorry. Please share. Please like, please share. I'm disappointed in this one thing. In the liking and the sharing. I've been on Facebook the last few days. And I've been on Facebook because more of you watch it on Facebook. And over 1,000 watch. I don't enjoy posting on Facebook because it gets lost. The content gets lost in the feed, but also on YouTube pushes it out. But I post on I post on Facebook so that you can share it to your friends and family and to a wider content. And sadly, the vast majority of you don't share my content. And the only way this gets out is by sharing. And I know, thank you, Natalie. I know, Natalia, thank you. But that's the problem. Because if we don't tell our own story, you've seen what they're doing. If we don't tell our own story, then it will never be told. And their narrative wins. So please share, please like, please, if you have the funds available, buy me a coffee. This is, to all extents and purposes, my full-time job, and I earn £500 a month. So you work that one out. £125 a week is what I earn. So buy me a coffee. Subscribe to the website, even if it's the free settings. So subscribe to the website. I had my friend David Gidman message me yesterday, and I'm sure you all understand. I'm focused. I'm in a place where I'm trying to draw things together in my mind on the page in the Apple notebook I use, the notes I take, the blue board, just to pull all the strings together and make sense of what's gone on and where the holes are. So I haven't got time for some of this, but I know David. I respect David. David contacted me. Yvonne called me earlier. It was good to hear her voice. Someone else contacted me yesterday, and it's to do with Sam. And apparently she's been trying to get hold of me. Well, I'm sorry. And I know she finds a way of listening, but I blocked her on everything because I'm really sorry. Calling me names I can deal with. Swearing and shouting at me I can deal with. It's fine. I've been sworn at and shouted at all my life. It's absolutely fine. Calling me names, no problem. A meeting with Neil Wilby to try and have me arrested, report me to the police. Meeting with Irish Immy and all of that. Having conversations with girls that they've picked up and found to try and prep them to lie, to go to the police with malicious, fabricated allegations that I'm a child abuser. What do you want me to say? I know what's gone on. It's very clear what's gone on. The different places you've gone to have used you for their ends. And once they've had no more use of you, they've dropped you and you've gone somewhere else and you've gone somewhere else. And I don't hold any grudges. It's fine. What happened to you is wrong. What you tried to do to me. Moyib's here somewhere. He'll share with you. People have tried to kill me. I've spent my life working in places where people, I'm all right with it. Just give me a few days. I don't know what you want. I don't know how I can help you. But you'll have to give me a few days. Okay. Just speak to David, Yvonne, whoever you've been liaising with. I did not, unlike others, I did not engage in this for myself. I've got nothing out of engaging in this. I had Kaiser on the phone earlier, and he was upset that he felt Maggie Oliver was taking the glory. Like, I'm fine. There's someone else. I'm not interested. There's work yet to be done for us. There's work yet to be done for us. And I'm not interested. I've said to you all from the beginning. I'll happily go away, read my books, get a minimum paid job somewhere, and see out my days. And I'll be fine with that. I'll genuinely be fine with that. Let's move on. So please, Sam, Speak to whoever you've spoken to, someone who knows me in our respect, and I'll work something out. I'll have a cup of coffee with you or something. I'll work something out. Okay. I've been on the Oldham Council website. Remember I talked about jigsaws if you saw my Facebook page? And you know things don't add up when the shape of the jigsaw and the veneer on top don't match. It's when things have been messed around with. It's how I was taught, which is why I articulate it this way. When you go looking for holes in reports, and this report is nothing, you know. When you go doing an audit and looking for holes, you know people are messed about when the pieces don't align properly. When the veneer on top and the shapes underneath don't match. That's when you know things have been messed about with. And one of those things that have been messed about with, and I mentioned it a couple of months ago, probably about 4 or 5 months ago. After Harry Caffrell became Chief Executive of Oldham Council, a number of council meetings disappeared off their YouTube channel. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the council's YouTube channel. And all their meetings are meant to go on there, and they do go on there. And the full council meetings are there. They're seen as one. And so on. And I've not put all the pieces together yet, but some of the council meetings are missing. One of them's missing is this one. Police called into Oldham full council meeting controlled rowdy protesters. Remember it? For many of you, it was the beginning of this journey. You can see this council meeting was the 7th of November, so I presume it was the day before, the 6th of November, 2019. Work our way down. Full council meeting, September. That's 2020, give me a second. July 19. Full council meeting, July 19. September 19. There. Ninth of September 2020. Do you see? Full council meeting, September 2019. And the next one jumps to September 2020. Now, I know COVID kicked in and stuff, but there was a meeting, as you can see here. 7th of November. And there was another one. I think it was December. It was the only meeting I'd ever been to. It's the only council meeting I'd ever been to. And at that council meeting, Debbie Barrett Cole asked a question. Not the one where she wasn't allowed to ask the question. The next one, she asked a question. And the response had been pre-prepared. And I'm recalling here rather than the actual content. But my memory, I think, is, it's okay. And what I recall, even the online meetings, they're on there. They come on. Do you not remember when they had like the blankety blank sort of grid system with them all on the screen? So the November meeting has disappeared, and another one has disappeared. And it was the only one I went to. I met Mark Wilkinson there, said hello. I went with Moab, actually. Because I left with Moab. And Debbie Barrett Cole asked a question. Is the one where she was allowed to ask a question, and Sean Fielding got up. and did his performance and answered the question. And my recollection of that meeting was that she asked a question about Shabir Ahmed. And Sean Fielding got up and effectively said checks had been made, blah, 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 nothing to see. We did inspections at the time. You know, there was an investigation or an inspection at the time. So, that's the Shabir Ahmed. It seems the council is saying one thing, and now the report is saying something else. But let me tell you a story about Shabir Ahmed. I revealed it first, remember? None people didn't believe it. And now it's come out that Shabir Ahmed worked for Oldham Council for 18 years. So go with me here. Now, if I brought that information to you, that the other information that came from the same sources has some credibility. We accept that, yeah? If I brought forward that Shabir Ahmed worked for Oldham Council, he was a member of the Labour Party, and he had access to children, that should mean that all the other information I've got from the same source has some credence. Yeah, I've not just made it up. We accept that. I think we accept that now. Even my worst critics would accept that now. Shabir Ahmed was employed by a man, or employed in the council, employed by or reported to a man called Abdul Karim. Abdul Karim was a senior officer in the chief exec's office. Throughout the 90s, he worked for the chief exec's office, and he worked along the likes of a man called Bruce Penhale, who's still in the council, who leads on all the race and cohesion stuff. Abdul Karim is the secretary of Oldham Central Mosque that I exposed for having the chairman who was a convicted sex offender. And nearly all of the management committee were Labour Party members. Remember all of that? So the link with Abdul Karim was that not just that he worked at Oldham Council in a senior strategic role. He's linked to Oldham Central Mosque. And the story goes, he was the one who gave Shabir Ahmed the job and had oversight of him. Abdul Karim is the brother of Abdul Jabbar, Councillor Abdul Jabbar, Deputy Leader of Oldham Council. Whilst working at Oldham Council, Shabir Ahmed also moonlighted or worked at a company called CSDA. CSDA I've brought to your attention. The chairman of CSDA is a man called Mohibur Rahman, or the director, of CSDA was a man called Mohibur Rahman, and I shared pictures of you with him out with Jim McMahon campaigning together. So there's a clear link now between all of them. Connections. Shabir Ahmed's wife committed suicide in the boating lake at Alexander Park. For those of you who say, why didn't the family speak up? I will tell you the story now, because it's a horrific story. Shabir Ahmed's wife committed suicide in the boating lake. She walked into the boating lake and never came back out. Now, I remember the boating lake from when I was a child. There's no part of that lake that you can't stand up in. It's actually not deep enough the further you go. So to have drowned yourself in that boating lake, you'd had to have forcefully held yourself down under the water. Shabir Ahmed, senior member of the Labour Party, remember, had 2 daughters. Both daughters are in protective custody or whatever it is that the police give to keep them hidden. Now, why would 2 daughters need to be hidden if Shabir Ahmed is in prison? It's because, as well as being what he was and hanging out at the Pakistani Community Centre, Shabir Ahmed was networked with the most dangerous cartel in Oldham. And speaking out against your community, never mind your father, in the community I come from, and with these people. Now, there's a reason why they're in custody, and I won't go into it, but if you have an appreciation of Shabir Ahmed and an understanding of 2 girls, I'm sure you can understand what he was doing elsewhere. Yeah? The report, if you read NEWSAM's cover-up report and RIDGWAY's, when it tries to defend Oldham Council on one of the points, it makes reference to 2 children being abducted. 2 children being abducted. And nothing happened because the children did not press charges. They just hide it there. 2 children being abducted, but it's okay. It's no one's fault. It's not the council's fault or the police's fault, because the children did not press charges. I'll let you decide who those 2 children were. At every stage in this report, there are clear holes in it, and holes that have been intentionally put in there. Now, for some reason, whilst NEWSAM and RIDGWAY acknowledge that case files were inexplicably closed, and read it yourself, Shabir Ahmed was clearly protected. I don't think there's any ambiguity whatsoever. Shabir Ahmed was clearly politically protected, and even from prison, he's so dangerous that his children have got false identities and whatnot. It's worse, mate. I think what I'm suggesting is worse. And not a single one from his community has spoken out against him. Not a single one of his Labour Party friends have condemned his actions. Prominent member of the Labour Party. I think those of you who doubt my reference to the terms cartels and what goes on in my community, I find it astonishing that fake white liberals are the ones who doubt me, who have no understanding of the community I come from and what goes in those places, are the ones who call me a racist. So, he's a kingpin. He's a cartel kingpin who set up shop at the Pakistani Community Centre, paid for by you, so he drew a full-time wage from you for 18 years. No, he's in prison. He's still in prison. It's one of his mates that are out, but he's in prison. For 18 years, he drew a wage. And the council claim that they didn't know to investigate when someone who works for you for 18 years, like, you're not going to recognise him. Like they weren't told. This was a strategic cover-up of a senior kingpin in the Pakistani community, prominent Labour Party member who clearly controlled power, votes. And when Shabir Ahmed what do you think? I don't know, mate. Sorry, he just made me laugh with that. I'm trying to do a serious story and that just came up, and I'm sorry, I just laughed. When Shabir Ahmed was charged, when you're charged, you're not locked up straight away, no, and all of this is coming out. Two things happened that so far I'm aware of. More may have happened, but so far I'm aware. And these come from what I consider to be credible sources. The same sources that gave me the information through which I risked my neck in revealing that Shabir Ahmed was employed by Oldham Council with access to children. Sorry, 3 bits that I need to share. One I've already shared, but 2 I haven't yet. Shabir Ahmed was not just based at the Pakistani Community Centre. He had access to children and young mothers in particular at Burnham Children's Centre. I believe this information to be true, and I'll let you come to terms with what that means should it be true, and I believe it is true. I have no reason to doubt the source. Shabir Ahmed also went to the Labour Party, senior politicians in the Labour Party, for help when he was exposed. And senior politicians in the Labour Party went and helped him find legal counsel. Let that sink in. Knowing what he had done, senior politicians and what RIDGWAY and NEWSAM omit, or something else they omit, is that Shabir Ahmed, when arrested and facing trial, character references were provided, and one of those character references came from the Mayor's office in Oldham Council. So there's more to the Shabir, and look at what they've already admitted on Shabir Ahmed. But there's more. I think it's a simple question. for a simple series of questions. Shabir Ahmed is linked to Abdul Karim, who's the brother of Abdul Jabbar. Teresa's not here today. You know who the mayor was. You know who the mayor was. Abdul Karim and Abdul Jabbar, or the family Jabbar, owned the old Westwood Conservative Club through their family networks, but ask anyone in our community. I will tell you. We all know who owns the Westwood Conservative Club. What was the Westwood Conservative Club? It became the Westwood East Restaurant. Upstairs in the Westwood East Restaurant was a taxi firm called Telecars. They, the family Jabbar, remember Shabir Ahmed's history, as Teresa will tell you, was his through taxi driving as well. Telecars was neck deep in the scandal of taxi drivers grooming and gang raping children. It's now proven in the report that the licensing committee approved the taxi licenses of multiple child sex offenders, because that's what they were. The licensing committee, Oldham Council's licensing committee, and Amanda Chaddison wants you to move on. But central to the grooming gang network, my friend Billy from Page UK will tell you, is how these children are transported, and they're transported in taxis by Pakistani taxi drivers or Bangladeshi taxi drivers. Take your pick. If you want to claim I'm being racist, I'm not bothered. It's one or the other. So you've now got 2 links to the deputy leader of Oldham Council, to this guy. And I think it's a question. So those of you who are going to this meeting next week and are submitting questions, Shabir Ahmed is now confirmed to have worked for Oldham Council, and it's now a matter of fact. And this is why I wanted to wait. I'm sorry, Anita, hi. I'm sorry I got cross with you. But this is why I wanted to wait until after we'd had time to look at the report and find the right questions to ask. And this is the first of the right questions. Shabir Ahmed is confirmed to have worked for Oldham Council for 18 years. The report condemns Oldham Council for its failures which could have prevented Shabir Ahmed from going on to rape other children. Fact. Can Oldham Council please confirm that Shabir Ahmed was not provided with a reference of any form from the mayor's office or any other part of the council to aid him whilst he was being prosecuted, investigated, whatever? But you see, you pin them to the wall and you punch them and you keep punching them. Come on, Amanda Chaddison. Come on. And I don't mean punch them as in, you understand what I mean. There's no wriggle room here. You've been exposed. And for those who still aren't sure, because in some of this language they use, they put something in front of you and you don't really understand it, so you gloss over and move on. The licensing committee, so we're clear, has a person sat in front of them. A cartel kingpin and his grooming gang mates, essentially is what these taxi drivers were, sit in front of a panel of 3, 4, 5 councillors. Moyab, good job here. How many councillors sit on the licensing committee, mate? The licensing committee, on a case-by-case basis, are presented a file. They knew they were discussing whether to give someone a license. Each of those councillors knew whether they were going, to give someone a license who was convicted of child sex offences, raping children, raping young women. They knew. No, mate, fuck off. Not interested. I'm not interested in Rossendale right now. This is a time for targeting focus. In the Civic Centre in Oldham, councillors sat down with a file in front of them, facing a Pakistani mobster with control, or his cartel had control of thousands of votes, and they ignored that he'd raped children and awarded his license. The report pulls that out, confirms it, right? I'm not making this up. The report now confirms it, yes? Question 2. Question 2. On each occasion that the report identified individuals who'd been awarded licenses, even though they had been given, on each occasion, the council awarded individuals known to them as child sex offenders or having sexually assaulted young women, and still provided them with references. Who were the councillors on each of those panels, on each of those licensing committees? Who were the councillors? Do you see? There are councillors in that council chamber now who were councillors between 2010 and 2013. Okay? Do you remember shall I move on? Just give me a second. Let me gather my thoughts. The first response from Jim McMahon, I think it came out even before the press conference had finished, signed off by Angela Rayner and Debbie Abrahams, was to focus on how the report had found it wasn't a cover-up. And it wasn't a cover-up in exchange for what? Votes, as I've been maintaining. I can reveal right now I can reveal that Malcolm NEWSAM and Gary Ridgway disregarded evidence of exactly that. They disregarded evidence of exactly that. I have witnesses who provided that evidence and witnesses who watched that witness provide that evidence. And Malcolm NEWSAM and Gary Ridgway ignored it. So their claim that there was no evidence is wrong. Now, they could say the evidence didn't stack up. They could have said a whole host of other things about the evidence not standing up to scrutiny, but NEWSAM specifically said no evidence. Now, let me explain to you and give you another story. Jim McMahon replaced Michael Meacher as MP. And for Jim McMahon to secure to become an MP, the first stepping stone is to get yourself on the shortlist, which for McMahon was straightforward. Labour Party head office would do that for him. No problem. Leader of the council. But to secure the nominations, McMahon needed the votes of the members, because the members vote. The members select the candidate, and Jim McMahon wanted to become the candidate. Ask anyone who was at that meeting when McMahon was selected, and he went round and did the deals first. Moyab, did he not do the deals? Did he not go to Coldust and ask for Jabbar to support him? Did he not go to Werneth? Did he not go to Medlock? He had to get Coldust, Medlock, Werneth, North Chadderton, 4 cartel areas, heavy Asian areas, to back him out of the Oldham, Western Royton wards. And for a number of years, he'd been taking care of them, keeping them sweet. Hey, Malcolm, that term sound familiar to you? Keeping them sweet. Is that one of the evidence bits that you removed? So McMahon needed to keep the Asian Labour Party members sweet, because if they en masse backed someone else, he would not get the candidacy. So why would he have done, if he was involved in the cover-up whilst he was leader of the council, why would he have done that? Whilst Michael Meacher stood in the election, the last election he stood in, it was common knowledge in the Labour Party that Michael Meacher had 18 months to live. They knew that he was dying, and McMahon was manoeuvring in the background to make sure that when Meacher died, he would be able to become the official Labour Party candidate, providing he got the Muslim members' vote 1, and then the Muslim bloc vote 2. And the only way of a male becoming a Labour Party candidate, because at the time they had an all-woman shortlist because of the deficiency of female members in the Labour Party, female MPs, the only way, the loophole they created, which is why in my intro I talk about he exploited a Labour Party loophole. The loophole was a man can stand if the existing MP dies. So it's a vacant seat. a by-election, then you can have a male. Otherwise, in a general election, they were all women shortlists. So what McMahon did was keep the Muslim vote sweet. And one of the ways in which he kept the Muslim vote sweet is in his role of the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. He was the leader of the council during this period. He was the fucking leader of the council. NEWSAM and Ridgway's nonsense about the BBC reporter and that report coming out, that came out months afterwards in a completely different way, buried in. The Oldham story was buried in a wider story about Rusholme and Manchester. Kevin Fitzpatrick's story was not specifically about Oldham in the way the initial contact was. And if you read NEWSAM and Ridgway's report, it claims it wasn't a cover-up because Oldham Council had a strategy. Their strategy was going after the grooming gangs, but not telling you about it. Not telling parents that their children were at risk whilst they privately, allegedly went after the grooming gangs. How many of you really believe they went after the grooming gangs? So, McMahon knows Michael Meacher has a limited time left. He knows he has to secure the members' votes from those specific wards. And he then knows, because at the time there was a threat of UKIP, remember? He knows he's got to get the postal votes in. And it goes back to Oldham Central Mosque. Abdul Karim, remember where I started this story, linking you back to Shabir Ahmed, secretary of the mosque. And that mosque issuing a statement, I think in the Telegraph, we don't have anything to do with politics. When that mosque was specifically identified for postal vote harvesting after a 100% surge in postal votes in one area. Central to all of this, going back to the taxi guys who sat there like this. So what if I've raped some kids? I belong to Daddy's cartel. We control 5,000 votes and we decide who becomes the next MP candidate, who gets the next candidacy because of the number of members we have. There you go, Mr. Ali Samosa. You carry on being a taxi driver. No problem. If you're finding this transmission of value, please do like it. Please do share it. And if you are able to, please do support my work. No one else is sharing this with you. It isn't because no one else doesn't have this information. Come on, Malcolm. Come on, Gary. Where are you, lads? Pair of con artists, aren't you? You're brought in to highlight failings, but to cover up for those who did the failing. That's what you've been making your career out of. "97 child sex offenders they wrote about were left on the streets of Manchester in the last report they wrote. Forced to admit because the data was there, they couldn't hide it. But they won't say which police officer made the decision to take those police officers away and allow those 97 to carry on. The closing down of Operation Augusta. The council minutes go missing. The police minutes go missing. Like we believe that. And they won't find out who actually sits on that committee and name those people. So even if the minutes go missing, having worked in local authority, having sat on multi-agency panels, I knew every member of that. They would have known every member of that. Yeah. And you guys, you particularly, but the people in my town, a small section, but a significant section, are still saying nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Now, I have nothing but respect for Maggie Oliver. I have nothing but respect for her. I think those of you who follow me can understand by now that I do not need to agree with everything you do. And I can point out to things I find fault with, but that doesn't mean I don't respect you. I don't have to be a blind follower either way, which is why some of the other political parties and individuals have fallen out with me. I'll just call it how I see it. And I'm not keen on what she's currently doing regarding NEWSAM and RIDGWAY. She defended them before, and she's defending them again. Yet, she's picked out something else. Let me play this for you. Let me bring it up.
And that she should go away and come back when she wasn't drunk. She was literally taken from the police station by men in a car who went on to rape her. And that's only one of the stories. Stories started swirling around in Oldham a few years ago that there was a cover-up going on. These very much on social media, that the police and the council were covering things up. And that's why this report was commissioned. As I said, it's taken 3 years, and that started to fuel local suspicion that why was it taking so long? Anyway, it is a very comprehensive report from the sounds of it, but it does also say things like the council was giving no...
It is a very comprehensive report from the sounds of it, right? Bear that line in mind as we work our way through.
Sex offenders who'd been convicted of offences, giving them licences to drive taxis. So the list of accusations does go on and does not give you any confidence in the police or the council. That they have both apologised profusely, but really, what have they done to fix some of these ingrained problems? Well, I'm so pleased to be joined by Maggie Oliver. You'll remember Maggie, very, very well known for being a whistleblower, police officer herself, worked for the police, and then blew the whistle on some of these grooming stories that were not being taken seriously by the police. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Nice. Thank you for having me on, Daisy.
Well, Maggie, just give us your reaction to this report today. Does the report go far enough? No. Did the report find that there had been a cover-up, as some local people started to suspect?
What I'd say, Daisy, is that unlike Rochdale and Augusta in Manchester, I didn't actually work in Oldham. So I can't speak in detail about the cases other than that of Sophie. And I would like to use her as an example of what I say was an attempt to cover up her story and block her from this inquiry. You know.
Okay. So she doesn't want, Maggie Oliver doesn't want, and I'm not criticising, by the way, I'm just commentating on what that's come out with. Maggie Oliver doesn't want to answer the question about whether it was a cover-up because she doesn't have the knowledge of the wider setting. She's known about what's gone on in Oldham for the last 3 years. She could have phoned me, phoned any one of you and had that conversation, but she chose not to. That's her prerogative. I'm not criticising her. It's an observation. But she wants to talk about the case of Sophie, and she says that was a cover-up. So it was a cover-up. Because the case of Sophie is identified in this grooming gang report in Oldham. So was it a cover-up or wasn't it?
I've heard Andy Burnham today and the cases other than that of Sophie. And I would like to use her as an example of what I say was an attempt to cover up her story and block her from this inquiry. You know, I've heard Andy Burnham today, and I've also heard the new Chief Constable trying to imply that these are historic failures again. What I want your listeners to know is that in February of this year, I've been supporting Sophie for almost 3 years, and she came to me to say she...
Okay, so confirmation from Maggie Oliver. She'd been supporting Sophie for almost 3 years. So confirmation that she's aware of what's gone on in Oldham for at least 3 years. Okay.
Still hadn't been asked to contribute to this review. I went to the review team and they had been told... I've been supporting Sophie for almost 3 years, and she came to me to say she still hadn't been asked to contribute to this review. I went to the review team and they had been told by Oldham Council and by the police that Sophie was not prepared to speak to them, that she didn't want to speak to them. Furthermore, they were led to believe that if they pursued her, that she was at risk of committing suicide. Now, if that isn't a...
Okay. So Sophie didn't want, the review team were told Sophie didn't want to speak to him, and if she did speak to him, she'd be at risk of committing suicide. Just hear that bit again, okay? This is where prison sentences should be handed out. And I'll get to that, and I'll get to the third question I'd like somebody to write in or ask. But just hear this out.
Want to speak to them. Furthermore, they were led to believe that if she came to me to say she still hadn't been asked to contribute to this review.
So she went to Maggie Oliver and said she hadn't yet been contacted to contribute to the review. And her case, by the way, is specifically mentioned in the terms of reference. Okay? So Sophie's case is specifically mentioned in the terms of reference. And 3 months ago, 2.5 years into it, NEWSAM and RIDGWAY still hadn't spoken to her, so she's concerned, and she goes to Maggie Oliver and says, Maggie, they've not come and spoken to me yet. Right? That's what's took place. It's not what I'm saying. It's what Maggie Oliver's saying. If she stood for mayor, by the way, I'd vote for her. If she stood for GM mayor, by the way, I'd vote for her. Well respected. You don't have to agree with everyone, you know, all the time to respect them, but there you go.
I went to the review team and they...
She went to the review team. So she bypassed Oldham Council and went to the review team.
Had been told by Oldham Council and by the police that Sophie was not prepared to speak to them, that she did...
Oldham Council. So Maggie Oliver went to NEWSAM and RIDGWAY, and NEWSAM and RIDGWAY said to Maggie Oliver that Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police had said to them that Sophie did not want to speak to them?
Want to speak to them. Furthermore, they were led to believe that if they pursued her, that she was at risk of committing suicide. Now,
and if Ridgway and NEWSAM tried to speak to her, she was at risk of committing suicide. So Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council. Now, who the fuck is Greater Manchester Police and who on earth, is Oldham Council? I've said it before. My mate Nick messaged me yesterday. He used to work in housing for the council. I was having a brew with my brother. My brother earlier on worked somewhere in the council at some point in his youth. I worked for the council. I had friends of mine. I bumped into a lad yesterday. Not yesterday, on Sunday. Playing air hockey. I've not seen him in years. He's got 3 kids. His son and my daughter played air hockey together whilst we talked about being youth workers together. Well, was it us? Was it him? Who in the council specifically told the review team that Sophie did not want to talk to them, and if Sophie spoke to them, if they pursued her, she would commit suicide? Who specifically in the council? Who specifically in the council said that? Thank you, John. It's simple, isn't it, DC? It's simple. Who specifically in the council said that? And do you remember I put up black propaganda tactics used by NEWSAM and Ridgway? NEWSAM and Ridgway, do you believe that expert investigators, do you believe that expert investigators did not really know what was going on? Do you believe Sophie is the only one that the police and the council blocked? Remember, I did this a couple of weeks ago. Let me just flip it over here for a second. Bear with me. Let me just flip it over here. I did this a few months ago. I put it up on YouTube. I now know it would have been someone from Greater Manchester Police or Oldham Council who complained to YouTube, threatened to sue me. YouTube took it down. It's up on Rumble. All the ones that YouTube take down, I put it up on Rumble. And what I was trying to figure out what it was that I might have said in that transmission that resulted in YouTube taking it down for fear of legal action. Now I know what it was, and it was this. You should still be able to hear me. This is NEWSAM and Ridgway. NEWSAM and Ridgway get information from Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council. Oldham Council specifically, and I raised this, have a committee, a subgroup of some form, of unnamed individuals who are responsible for extracting information from these sources and feed them to Ridgway. The only investigation these guys can do is based upon the information that this committee provides them. And this committee has now been proven to have been telling NEWSAM and Ridgway lies. Now you can decide whether these lads weren't savvy enough, being the experts they were, because what we now know, if Maggie Oliver hadn't bypassed this structure and gone straight to them and clearly threatened them to say, if you don't speak to Sophie directly, your entire operation is in a mess. They were prepared up to 3 months before the report was published. They were prepared to publish a report with everything to do with this kid hidden. Now, I know 100% of one other child who's come to me, who these guys have simply written about because they were told from this lot not to talk to her, or they decided not to talk to her directly themselves. Either way, it's a travesty, it's a cover-up, and I know of multiple individuals here, victims, and witnesses over here, who, because of their interactions with Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council, ran away and refused to give a testimony. Do you see how far removed this is intentional. This is a not fit for process structure through which you take evidence. And of course, when they finally took evidence, when these two chancers finally took evidence of victims or witnesses who came through all of this, forced their way through that and got to this, the final insult was these two chancers took notes. And they took notes and put statements in front of victims and witnesses to sign off, and many of them refused. And when they refused, they ripped it up, and that was the end of it. Do you see? For those of you who are joining me who've never met me, my name is Raja Mia. I am responsible for the Recusant 9 transmissions. Some of you kind people contacted me today. My brother phoned me excited this morning at 9:30. My brother, for Moya will tell you, is absolutely nothing like me. He is very straight, very middle of the road, very, you know, he's got a pension, he's got a nice job, drives a very practical car, lives in a house, he's married, you know, and apparently I was name checked on LBC. Nick Ferrari, someone phoned some lady who runs a national project supporting victims, name checked me. And then someone else contacted me, I think one of you contacted me in the afternoon, and Talk Radio did something. So we get in there. It's because of this. It's because of what I've just done, what I'm doing. I put my skills, curses, whatever they are, and I apply them here, now, for the benefit of my town and my children, who otherwise would not have a voice. And with the greatest of respect to all of you, and I need all of you, and I need many more, at the end of the day, you need someone to be able to rip it apart step by step. And that's essentially the service I've been providing for the last 3 years. Do you see? Do you see what happened? Now, how can that report be fit for purpose? If it was done to one, I know it was done to someone else. How many more? I know it was done to a few people at the earlier stages who got scared off. I know one of the victims who was picked up from the gate of Count Hill School, where there's no reference in this report, the gates of Count Hill School. I know her and her mate The way the council contacted them scared them off. Don't for 1 second take us for fools, NEWSAM and RIDGWAY. You knew full well what was going on. This is just deniability. I don't know how many are watching it. I've got to log on. The numbers you see slightly different because some are slightly watching slightly behind, but give me a second, I'll bring it up. You've got me curious now, so I'm going to... I'm up to 739 followers on YouTube. Oh. If you're not following me, by the way, please do follow me. I had this dream that one day I'd get to 1,000 and 1,000 would open up a whole host of other features I could use, but I'm nowhere near. I think teenage kids have 10 times more. I'm sure one of my goddaughters does. Oh. What am I seeing? I'm seeing 224. So there's actually 95 of you watching right now, but there's 224. Let's finish the video off. Yeah, let's finish the video off. Give her a credit. It takes bravery, by the way. Give her, give Maggie Oliver credit. I'd have to agree with her everything, but give her a credit. If there's anything else that she says, I'll pause it. By the way, I had to go looking for this video because this wasn't on Talk TV. The bit that they've got on Talk TV is the more some other stuff she's talking about. But I thought this is the bit that's interesting, and they didn't have it for some reason. They didn't have this. Yvonne Eric put it up on my feed, by the way, so thank you, Yvonne. And someone else with like 5, James C has got like 5 followers, whoever he is, copied it off his phone, I think. Yes, please, Natalia, press the like button. Have I got any likes? I've got 50 likes. So of the 226 of you who are now watching, I've got 50 likes. And I don't know how many shares. I can't see it. I can't make any sense of it. Oh, never mind. Let's carry on.
If that isn't a cover-up, I don't know what is. And it was only because of my support for her and my risk of committing suicide. Now, if that isn't a cover-up, asked to contribute to this review.
I'll just go back a bit. Here we go.
I went to the review team and they had been told by Oldham Council and by the police that Sophie was not prepared to speak to them, that she didn't want to speak to them. Furthermore, they were led to believe that if they pursued her, that she was at risk of committing suicide. Now, if that isn't a cover-up, I don't know what is. And it was only because of my support for her.
So Maggie Oliver is saying it's a cover-up. Yes, Maggie Oliver is now confirmed that this is a cover-up. That the process I've just demonstrated to you on this, I'm sure you can make sense of it. Facilitated a cover-up. Yeah. And she's emotional about it. So she should be.
And my pressure on the review team that her story is in this review. I would also...
Okay. So Maggie Oliver is confirming that it was because of her and her pressure You know, it's a global name here. It's not Raja Mir who just, you know, chats to his pals on YouTube. This is Maggie Oliver, who had to exert pressure for the review team and force them into a corner to speak to Sophie. Force them to speak to her.
Say that the review makes it very clear that in the 15 years that Sophie has been fighting to be heard, she took her complaints to the Professional Standards Board, to the IOPC, to the Home Affairs Select Committee, and none of those saw fit to tell Sophie that the identity of at least 2 of her abusers that she didn't know they knew the names of were known to them all along. They have not been prosecuted to this day. I don't know about the political cover-ups in Oldham because I don't know enough about it.
She doesn't know about the political cover-ups in Oldham because she doesn't know enough about them, but she's just described a cover-up. So there are 2 types of cover-up that is taking place apparently in Oldham. It's what McMahon and the others have done. They've split it up. The report confirms there were cover-ups. Yep, the report confirms there were cover-ups. So the report confirms that the council and the police covered up the grooming and gang rape of our children and failed them. The report tries to claim that these cover-ups were not politically motivated. So there was no, you know, it wasn't a political cover-up. It was just incompetence. But once you start to look at what the report actually finds and the holes that it produces, actually it was a political cover-up, and I'll get onto that. But the third thing that we now know is there was a third cover-up, and it was a cover-up of the actual review. So this assurance review in itself was a cover-up exercise. That's what Maggie Oliver is essentially saying. This assurance review was a cover-up exercise. The terms of reference and the framework in which it operated, where it relied on the police and Oldham Council to determine what information was fed to the review team, and confirmation now that the information fed to the review team had been falsified by an unnamed council committee confirms that this process was a cover-up. So if it confirms that this process was a cover-up, then this review is not worth the paper it's printed on. Or am I interpreting this wrong? Or have I got an agenda? I'm methodically working through this. Am I making it up? I know English is my second language. And sometimes I need to put my accent on and read things again. Actually, English isn't my second language. I've just been taking the piss with that since forever. My Bangla is actually my second language. The review confirms the police and Oldham Council covered up the grooming and gang rape of our town children and failed them. The review decides, and it's wrong in its decision in my opinion, I'll go through it like I've said, that the cover-up wasn't for political reasons. It wasn't for the exchange of votes. It had no remit to look into that, by the way, and it wasn't skilled in doing that exercise. But that's a conversation for later. But now Maggie Oliver confirms in an interview with Talk TV that the review itself, the way it was conducted, the framework, the way it was set up, was a cover-up. come Oldham Council. Oldham Chronicle runs with the headline on Twitter: all documentation from Oldham Council relating to Sophie's case was examined by the review team. Is that headline what you've just heard? My friend Jane Barker, who I spoke to this morning on a different matter, and Jane's a lovely lady, responds, you need to add eventually to your tweet. Seems like Sophie and Maggie Oliver had to push to get her evidence heard and included. So the Oldham Chronicle are trying to spin this story that the review was fit for purpose. All documentation from Oldham Council relating to Sophie's case was examined by the review team eventually. And up to 3 months ago, the review team were not even going to interview her, because Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police have said she doesn't want to be interviewed and she'll commit suicide if you try and contact her. Who in Oldham Council sits on that subgroup? It's in their terms of reference. I've shared it before. It's a group that exists with named members. Those named members would be senior council officers. I'd imagine Paul Bentwhistle is one of them. It'd most likely have a senior councillor on it or oversight of it, because every one of those now need to be sacked immediately for gross misconduct. Every one of those who are responsible, who are named on that committee, need to be named, who belong to that committee need to be named at that council meeting on Monday. And Amanda Chadderton needs to confirm they have been sacked without notice for gross misconduct. And if it's a councillor, that councillor has got to have been made to resign, and not just sacked and resign, but that the matter has been referred to the police. I think he will. And my information is Gerard Jones, who you guys pay 120 odd thousand, the most strategic person to do with children and young people, is at the meeting on Monday where they've changed the rules and are allowing the officers to answer your questions and answer other councillors' questions. Well, if Gerard Jones is on that group, Gerard Jones needs marching out of the council meeting, clear his desk, and forget clear his desk. I'll go around and grab hold of everything in his desk and lobby out the window. And sorry, Natalie, I'm not casting dispersions on you. You've got it in one. A common Oldhamer gets it in one. From that, you've just understood it. Now, if our MPs had any credibility and any independence and cared the slightest about our children, they would be horrified at what we've identified, and they've got teams of people working for them. Not me with I can't even afford to print it out, so it's an Apple Pencil and scraps of paper I'm printing it on. They're all involved. They're all involved. And I have more. I have more, but I'll save that for another day. I have more. That's the end of Jim McMahon. You have 3 questions. I've gone through them. Someone coordinate. Get them in. Shabir Ahmed's reference. Who sat on each of the licensing committees? Each time one of these child sex offenders and young women rapists was still given a reference despite the licensing committee knowing what they'd done? And who sat on this committee responsible for feeding NEWSAM and RIDGWAY? Please, if you find value in these transmissions, I'm sure you appreciate by now, those of you who follow me, the amount of effort that goes into pulling this stuff together. Support my work. I'll carry on for as long as I can. And once I can't, I look forward to meeting many of you, all of you, most of you, your family members on Monday if I've not met you before. I will be going to the council meeting. Yes, anyone can and should. Everyone who can should. And if you can't, I spoke to Tracy earlier today and she was upset because she's clearly not in a physical state. And no, Tracy, purely, of course you shouldn't. But all of you who are fit and able to and can do should. And if you can't, please try and send someone else. I spoke to a councillor this week and I said I wanted 500 people there. He laughed at me. I've always looked at the world in a different way. I believe in my people. A very, very good evening. My name is Raja Amir. This was a Recusant 9 transmission.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.